The Alpha King didn't reject his Luna rejected him. Before the entire kingdom, the great moon temple stood beneath a sky washed silver by the full moon. Thousands of wolves crowded its marble steps, filling the sacred sanctuary with anticipation. Noble families lined the front rows, while warriors, merchants, healers, and children gathered behind them, eager to witness the rarest ceremony in the realm. Tonight, Alpha King Ronan Ashgrave and Luna Lyra Wintervale would renew the eternal mate bond. It was more than tradition. It was a promise before the moon goddess herself. Ronan smiled as Lyra walked toward him in a gown of white, embroidered with silver thread. The moonlight caught the bracelet around her wrist, the ancient silver band that symbolized the bond they had shared since they were 18. "You look nervous," he whispered with a grin. Lyra smiled back. "Maybe a little." He reached for her hand. "It'll be over in a few minutes." She held his gaze a heartbeat longer than usual. "I know." The high priest lifted his ceremonial staff. "Step forward." Ronan obeyed immediately. Lyra took one step, then stopped. The temple fell strangely quiet. She slowly lowered her eyes to the silver bracelet around her wrist. With trembling fingers, she unclasped it. A murmur swept through the crowd. Ronan frowned. "Lyra?" She held the bracelet in both hands. Tears shimmered in her eyes. Then, before anyone could stop her, she whispered the ancient words forbidden, except in the most desperate of circumstances. "I willingly sever the sacred bond." The world seemed to hold its breath. A violent pulse of silver light exploded between them. The mate mark on Ronan's chest cracked like shattered glass. Lines of glowing silver raced across his skin before dissolving into dust. Pain tore through every wolf inside the temple. Many collapsed to one knee. Others cried out as the sacred magic echoed through the pack. The high priest stumbled backward in horror. "No, it cannot be!" Ronan clutched his chest, struggling to breathe. His eyes found Lyra's. "Why?" The single word barely escaped him. She looked as though her heart had already broken. For one impossible moment, he thought she would run back into his arms. Instead, she forced herself to smile. It was beautiful and unbearably sad. "I don't love you anymore." Gasps rippled through the temple. Several noble women covered their mouths. A child began crying somewhere in the crowd. Even the priests stood frozen in disbelief. Ronan stared at the woman he had loved more than his own life. The woman who had promised to stand beside him until their final breath. Nothing made sense. "You don't mean that," he whispered. She closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them again, they held only quiet determination. "I do." She placed the silver bracelet upon the altar, turned away, and walked toward the temple doors. No one moved to stop her. No one even seemed capable of breathing. The great wooden doors slowly opened. Moonlight spilled across the stone floor. Without looking back, Lyra disappeared into the night. Ronan remained standing beneath the sacred altar, surrounded by thousands of witnesses, staring at the empty doorway where his future had just walked away. Outside, the temple bells continued ringing beneath the full moon. Inside, the Alpha King stood alone beneath a bond that no longer existed. By sunrise, Luna Lyra Wintervale no longer existed. The servants searched every room of the Luna wing before dawn. Her wardrobe stood almost empty. The silver gowns she had worn for royal ceremonies were neatly folded inside the wardrobe. The jewels gifted to her by foreign rulers remained untouched. Even the moon crown rested upon its velvet cushion. She had taken almost nothing, only a plain traveling cloak, a small leather satchel, and the memories no one could pack away. When Captain Aldrin burst into the throne room, his face had turned pale. "Your Majesty, the Luna is gone." Ronan didn't answer. He simply walked toward the Luna wing himself. The room was spotless, almost painfully so. It looked less like someone had fled, and more like someone had quietly returned a borrowed life. On the writing desk rested a single folded letter. His name was written across the front. He recognized Lyra's handwriting immediately. His hands tightened around the paper as he unfolded it. Inside were only 2 sentences. "Please hate me. It will make this easier." For several long moments, he stared at the words. Then, without speaking, he walked to the fireplace. The letter disappeared into the flames. Ash drifted upward. "So be it," he whispered. "If hatred is what you wanted, I'll give it to you." No one dared interrupt him. The years that followed changed the kingdom, and its king. Ronan stopped attending festivals. He no longer joined village celebrations after successful harvests. The warm smile that had once made frightened children run toward him instead of away from him simply disappeared. He ruled well, perhaps even better than before. Bandits vanished from the northern roads. The borders became safer than they had ever been. Trade flourished. The kingdom expanded. Its enemies learned to fear the Alpha King, whose heart had become as cold as winter steel. But the people quietly noticed something else. Their king never laughed. Not once. Whenever the Moon Festival returned each year, Ronan locked himself inside his study until dawn. No one questioned why. Everyone remembered the night the Luna had rejected him, before the entire kingdom. Only one person refused to believe the story everyone else accepted. The royal oracle. She had served 3 generations of rulers and was older than anyone could remember. Each time Ronan visited the temple to seek guidance, she watched him with eyes filled not with judgment, but sorrow. One evening, as the king turned to leave, after another silent visit, she quietly whispered, "I'm sorry." Ronan paused. "For what?" The old woman lowered her gaze. "For a truth I cannot tell you." His expression hardened. "If Lyra sent you—" "No." The oracle's voice trembled. "She asked nothing of me." "Then there's nothing left to discuss." He walked away without another word. The elderly woman remained kneeling before the sacred altar long after he disappeared. A single tear slipped down her weathered cheek. Hidden beneath her robes lay an ancient scroll sealed with royal wax. A prophecy, one she had sworn upon the moon goddess never to reveal, until the appointed time. And every year that passed, she prayed she would live long enough to finally tell the Alpha King why the woman he hated had once chosen to break her own heart instead of watching his stop forever. 5 years later, the royal oracle sent for the Alpha King. Not through a messenger, not through the royal council. She sent the temple's oldest priest, a man who had not left the sacred grounds in nearly 20 years. When Ronan saw him waiting outside the throne room, he knew something was wrong. "The oracle is dying," the old priest said quietly. "She wishes to see you." Ronan arrived at the moon temple before sunset. The once powerful oracle looked impossibly frail. Her silver hair spread across white linen like strands of moonlight. Even lifting her hand seemed to require all the strength she had left. "You came," she whispered. "You summoned your king." A faint smile crossed her face. "No, I summoned the man who deserves the truth." The priest closed the chamber doors, leaving them alone. The oracle reached beneath her blanket and withdrew an ancient scroll sealed with the royal crest. The wax had never been broken. "I've guarded this for 5 years," Ronan frowned. "What is it?" "A prophecy." She placed the scroll into his hands. "It concerns you." His heartbeat quickened as he broke the seal. The parchment inside was older than he expected. Written in faded silver ink were words that made the blood drain from his face. When the Moon King's blood is touched by shadow, the sacred mate bond shall become its prison. Should the bond endure, the Alpha King shall die before his 30th winter. Only willing rejection by the true mate can break the curse. The mate must be believed completely, or the darkness will remain. Ronan read the passage again, then again. His hands began trembling. I don't understand. The oracle's eyes filled with tears. The assassination attempt, 5 years earlier, masked assassins had attacked the royal carriage during a diplomatic journey. Ronan remembered the poisoned blade that had barely pierced his shoulder. The healers had declared him fully recovered. They had been wrong. The blade carried forbidden shadow magic, the oracle continued. It entered your mate bond. If the bond had remained, she struggled to breathe. You would have died before your 30th birthday. Ronan slowly looked up. There was no cure? None. Except one. The oracle nodded. The bond had to be willingly broken. He shook his head in disbelief. No. It couldn't have been that simple. It wasn't. Her voice broke. The ritual demanded something impossible. You had to truly believe Lyra no longer loved you. If you suspected she sacrificed herself, the curse would survive. The room spun around him. Every memory came rushing back. Her trembling hands, her forced smile, the letter. Please hate me. It was never for her, he whispered. It was for me. The oracle closed her eyes. She chose to carry your hatred, so you could carry on living. Silence swallowed the chamber. 5 years. 5 years of anger. 5 years of believing the woman he loved had abandoned him without reason. 5 years, while every sunrise he witnessed had been a gift she had purchased with her own broken heart. A tear struck the prophecy in his hands, then another. Ronan fell to his knees beside the oracle's bed. His voice shattered into a whisper. I hated the woman, who gave me 5 more years to live. Ronan left the moon temple before dawn. He didn't summon soldiers. He didn't send scouts. For the first time in 5 years, he searched for Lyra himself. The oracle's final clue led him north to a quiet lake hidden between pine-covered hills. There, beside a small wooden cottage, children laughed as wolf pups chased one another through the grass. Lyra stood among them, mending a little girl's torn cloak. She looked thinner than he remembered. Older, gentler. When she noticed him, her hands became still. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then she smiled. I see the prophecy finally ended. Ronan tried to speak. No words came. Instead, he crossed the yard, dropped to both knees before her, and bowed his head. The children fell silent. No one in the kingdom had ever seen the Alpha King kneel before anyone. I'm sorry, he whispered. My king, don't. His voice broke. Please don't call me that. I believed you betrayed me. I let you carry my hatred. Lyra slowly knelt until they were eye level. You were supposed to. He looked up in disbelief. You weren't meant to know the truth. If you had guessed, the curse would have remained. A small wolf pup wandered between them and rested against Ronan's leg. Lyra gently stroked its ears. I kept my promise. You lived. Tears blurred his vision, and you lost everything. She shook her head. I lost a title. I never lost the reason I made the choice. He stared at her. You. She smiled through tears. Every lonely morning was worth knowing you would see another sunrise. I never wanted gratitude. I only wanted your life. The children quietly gathered around them, sensing something important was happening, even if they couldn't understand it. One little boy slipped his tiny hand into Ronan's. Miss Lyra says crying doesn't make someone weak. Ronan managed the smallest smile. She's right. He looked back at Lyra. For the first time in years, they faced one another without lies standing between them. The lake shimmered behind the cottage. The orphaned pups resumed playing, unaware that the greatest misunderstanding in the kingdom had finally come to an end. The children quietly wandered toward the lakeshore, giving the two adults the privacy they somehow sensed they needed. For a long while, neither Ronan nor Lyra spoke. 5 years of silence could not be untangled in a single conversation. Ronan sat on the wooden steps outside the cottage, his hands clasped tightly together. "I've replayed that day 1,000 times," he said at last. "I kept asking myself what I had missed. I thought perhaps I hadn't loved you enough. Then I convinced myself I'd loved someone who never truly existed." His voice trembled. "I never imagined that you were saving my life." Lyra lowered herself beside him. "It was the hardest choice I ever made." She looked out across the calm water. "The oracle showed me the prophecy the day after the assassination attempt. I begged her to find another way. For weeks, we searched every ancient record, every forgotten ritual. There wasn't one." Ronan closed his eyes. "So you carried it alone?" She nodded. "I couldn't tell my parents. I couldn't tell the council. I couldn't even tell you. If anyone suspected the truth, the curse would remain." A painful silence settled between them. Finally, Ronan whispered, "That smile." She looked at him. "The one you gave me at the moon temple. I hated that smile. I dreamed about it. I thought you were smiling because you'd finally been freed from me." Lyra's eyes filled with tears. "I smiled because I knew it would be the last time I'd ever see you alive." His breath caught. "I wanted the last thing you remembered, to be me smiling, not crying." Ronan covered his face with both hands. A sob escaped before he could stop it. "I'm so sorry. I failed you." "No." Lyra gently pulled his hands away. "You believed exactly what you needed to believe." "I lied. I made you hate me. You didn't fail. I chose that pain for both of us." He searched her face. "Were you lonely?" She laughed softly through her tears. "Every day. I celebrated your victories from far away. When I heard you'd ended the Northern War, I cried all night. Not because I was sad, because you were alive to see peace." Ronan reached for her hand hesitantly. She let him take it. Their fingers intertwined naturally, though the sacred mate bond no longer connected them. The warmth was different, quieter. No magical pull echoed between their hearts. Only two people choosing not to let go. "I can't give you those 5 years back," Ronan said. "No." She smiled gently. "But we still have today. And tomorrow, if we're wise enough not to waste it." He laughed through his tears. "You always did know exactly what to say. So did you. I just had to wait 5 years to hear it again." They sat together until the sun dipped below the mountains, mourning the years they had lost. Not blaming each other, not blaming fate, simply grieving what could never be returned. Yet for the first time since the bond had shattered beneath the moon temple, neither of them carried that grief alone. The royal elders did not celebrate Ronan's return. Instead, they pitied him. "The mate bond is gone," one elder said. "It can never be restored. The moon goddess herself cannot return what was willingly broken." Another shook his head. "You may forgive each other, but you can never truly be mates again." Ronan smiled. "I wasn't planning to ask fate." The following week, he returned to the lakeside cottage, not as a king, as a man carrying lumber over one shoulder. "The roof leaks," he said. "I thought I'd fix it." Lyra folded her arms. "I don't remember inviting you." "No, but the rain certainly did." She rolled her eyes. "You've become impossible." "So I've been told." The orphaned pups burst into laughter. By sunset, the roof no longer leaked. The next week, Ronan returned with fishing nets. The week after that, he built new beds for the younger children. Soon, the pups stopped asking when the Alpha King would visit again. They simply assumed he would. One rainy afternoon, Ronan placed a small wooden box on the porch. Lyra opened it. Inside rested a simple silver ring. No prophecy, no magic, no sacred bond. He smiled nervously. Just me. She closed the box and handed it back. No, the children gasped. Ronan only nodded. I'll ask again. He did. A month later. Then again, 2 months after that. Each answer remained the same. No. Finally, on his 4th visit, with another ring tucked into his pocket, Lyra began laughing before he could even speak. You really are stubborn. I've had 5 years to practice. She looked at him for a long moment, then held out her hand. I suppose. You've earned the chance to ask one more time. Ronan dropped to one knee. Lyra Wintervale. This time, nothing is choosing us. No prophecy, no destiny, no bond. Only my heart. Will you marry me? Tears filled her eyes as she slipped the ring onto her own finger. Yes. This time, I'm choosing you too. Around them, the orphaned pups erupted into cheers. For the first time in their lives, love wasn't being guided by fate. It was being chosen, freely, every single day. 1 year later, the kingdom gathered once again beneath the great moon temple. The same marble altar stood beneath the full moon. The same temple bells echoed through the valley. The same people filled the sacred courtyard. But everything else had changed. There was no high priest preparing an ancient mate ritual. No sacred bracelet rested upon the altar. No magical bond waited to be renewed. Instead, fresh wildflowers decorated the stone steps, and simple white ribbons fluttered gently in the evening breeze. The ceremony belonged not to destiny, but to choice. When Lyra appeared, the crowd fell silent. She wore no royal jewels, only a plain white gown, and the silver ring Ronan had given her months before. She smiled as she reached him. This time, there were no hidden tears, no heartbreaking secrets. Only peace. The officiant nodded. You may speak your vows. Ronan took both of Lyra's hands. The first time I stood here, I loved you because fate brought you into my life. He smiled softly. I thought our bond was what made us strong. He shook his head. I was wrong. My greatest strength was never the mark on my chest. It was the woman willing to lose everything so I could keep living. His voice steadied. This time, I choose you, knowing exactly what life without you feels like. And if I had to, I would choose you again every single day. Lyra's eyes glistened. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. The first time, I walked away because I believed it was the only way to save you. She squeezed his hands gently. This time, I don't have to save you by leaving. I get to stay. A tear rolled down Ronan's cheek. Together, they exchanged simple silver wedding rings. No flash of sacred magic filled the temple. No glowing mate marks appeared. Nothing supernatural happened. For one quiet heartbeat, the crowd simply watched. Then, somewhere beyond the temple walls, a lone wolf howled. Another answered. Then another. Within seconds, the valley echoed with the voices of countless wolves lifting their heads beneath the full moon. The people smiled through tears. Perhaps the moon goddess needed no magic after all. Some promises were already sacred. Ronan leaned forward and kissed Lyra gently. The applause that followed rolled across the temple like thunder. This wedding looked simpler than the first, yet everyone present understood something profound. Their first union had been blessed by fate. Their second had been earned through sacrifice, forgiveness, and love that survived even after destiny was gone. And somehow, that made it even stronger. 5 years after their second wedding, the little cottage beside the lake had become too small. Not because Ronan and Lyra filled it with treasures, because they had filled it with children. The orphaned wolf pups Lyra had once cared for had slowly become their family. Some had been abandoned by war. Others had lost parents to illness or harsh winters. None of them were ever turned away. When the oldest children outgrew the cottage, Ronan ordered larger buildings constructed along the lakeshore, not as a royal decree, as a father. Soon, the quiet refuge became known throughout the kingdom as Moonhaven, a sanctuary where no child would ever wonder if they belonged. Despite ruling the kingdom, Ronan visited every week without fail. He taught the older boys and girls how to hunt, fish, and defend themselves. The children loved teasing him whenever he tried to cook. "The soup's burned again," one little girl announced. Ronan tasted it. She was right. Lyra laughed so hard she nearly dropped the basket she was carrying. "I think the bread is safer." "It usually is," Ronan admitted. The children burst into laughter. Those ordinary moments became his favorite victories, far greater than winning battles. One autumn afternoon, a young pup asked the question everyone eventually wondered. "Your Majesty, do you miss having a mate bond?" Ronan looked at Lyra before answering. "Not anymore." The child frowned. "Why?" Ronan lifted his left hand, where his silver wedding ring caught the afternoon sunlight. "Because this reminds me of something important." "What?" "A bond given by fate brought us together." He smiled at Lyra. "But every day since then, we've stayed together because we wanted to." Lyra rested her hand over his. Love grows strongest when it's chosen. The children looked at the matching rings with quiet admiration. That evening, as laughter drifted across the lake and lanterns glowed inside Moonhaven, Ronan realized something he had never understood as a young alpha. Destiny could introduce two hearts, but only daily choices could build a family. And surrounded by the children they had chosen to love, he knew they had built something far stronger than magic ever could. Many years later, beside the Great Moon Temple stood a new memorial. It honored no battlefield, no legendary victory, no ancient king. Instead, carved into smooth white stone were the words, "The greatest love is sometimes mistaken for betrayal." Every spring, Ronan and Lyra brought their children and grandchildren to visit the memorial. The younger ones always stopped at the inscription. One little girl looked up at Ronan. "Grandfather, why don't you and grandmother wear mate bracelets like everyone else?" Ronan smiled and lifted his left hand. The simple silver wedding ring still rested on his finger. "Because this ring represents a promise we chose." The children gathered closer. "Our first bond was given to us by fate." He looked at Lyra with the same warmth he had carried since their second wedding. "Our second bond was earned." Another child turned to Lyra. "Were you scared when everyone thought you betrayed him?" She laughed softly. "Every single day." "Then why did you do it?" Lyra reached for Ronan's hand. Their fingers intertwined as naturally as they had years before. "Because love isn't measured by how tightly you hold someone," she smiled. "Sometimes, it's measured by what you're willing to sacrifice, so they can keep living." The children grew quiet. Even the oldest among them had never heard the story told so simply. Ronan looked toward the memorial. "For years, I believed the woman I loved had broken my heart." He gently squeezed Lyra's hand. "The truth was, she broke our sacred bond so death could never break me." A warm breeze carried the scent of wildflowers through the temple grounds. The wolves in the surrounding forest lifted their voices together beneath the spring sky. There was no sacred magic connecting Ronan and Lyra anymore. No glowing marks, no invisible thread woven by destiny. There hadn't been for many years. Yet anyone who watched them understood something the old legends had never fully explained. The strongest bonds were not always the ones given by the moon goddess. Sometimes, they were the ones two people rebuilt with forgiveness, patience, and thousands of ordinary choices made over a lifetime. As the family walked home together, the youngest child slipped between Ronan and Lyra, holding one of each of their hands. Neither of them let go. History remembered the day Luna Lyra Wintervale shattered the Alpha King's mate bond before the entire kingdom. But the people who knew the whole truth remembered something far greater. She had willingly become the woman everyone hated, so the man she loved could live long enough to be loved again. And when the truth finally found its way home, the Alpha King discovered that destiny had only introduced them. Choice had made them forever.